the woman that had an affair with this man who took out his whole family. And I take a step back and it's just like, I didn't know! Like, it's...
Something's weighing heavy, created too much pressure, this ain't healthy. We were all good, love was plenty. Now look at the cards love has dealt me.
He's so disgusting, I'm so ashamed of him and everything, and I just... All those little girls, they're so little,
New horrific details emerging.
Chris Watts strangled his pregnant wife Shanann inside their home after an early morning fight. Chris told her he was having an affair with a coworker and wanted out. The same morning, Chris murdered his 2 daughters, 3-year-old Celeste and 4-year-old Bella. He smothered them.
His statement to investigators was, they were very clearly, obviously dead, so I decided to dispose of their bodies. You didn't call 911, you didn't try CPR, you didn't even check on them to see if they were breathing. When you hear that, you're thinking, this just doesn't add up.
Something's weighing heavy, created too much pressure, this ain't healthy. We were all good, love was plenty. Now look at the cards love has dealt me.
This just doesn't add up.
10, and that afternoon, her friend Nicole showed up at the door. Like, I had texted Shanann a few times that day, called her, say, but she never got back to me, but she wasn't getting back to any of her people as well. And that's what really concerned a lot of people, is like, if she's not getting back to her, like, if she doesn't get back to me, that's fine, like, she gets busy during the day, but she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning. And Nicole called me when she was at the door, and that's when I came home. And then walked in the house, and nothing has vanished, nothing was here.
The story of the Watts family has managed to capture the hearts of many, but mainly because there are lots of unanswered questions. Due to Chris Watts deciding to plead guilty and not take it to court, left a lot of stones unturned. You see, in a court case, a lot of things not known to man would have came to the light. But since he pled guilty, most of the story is completely in the dark. The discovery files of Chris Watts contains 1,960 pages. But out of all of those pages, what can be known for certain? We know that everyone surrounding the Watts family never saw this coming. This was a complete shot in the dark. We know from testimonials and video footage that we can literally see Chris Watts leaving his home, bagging the truck in, and then roughly packing it for 20 minutes. But in that video, you do not see a body. I will repeat that. You do not see a body. Anything pertaining to that video is pure speculation. And we all know that from the beginning of this until the very end, Chris Watts has basically controlled the narrative himself. You don't believe everything that he said, and it's good reason for it. So why believe some of what he says? A liar is a liar, and you never believe what comes out of their mouth. Now, in the process of interrogation, I really didn't approve of how they basically strong-armed the interview. If you pay very close attention to the details of it, you will realize that most of the questions that were answered came out of their mouth first. Now, I'm pretty sure that they figured out early on that they would be able to control this interview due to how he conducts himself in a social environment. Many years prior to this, he actually gave a dissertation on relationship repair. I will play a clip of that, but the point of playing this clip is not to listen to what he was saying, but rather how he is acting.
My name is Chris Watts. I'm doing my communication speech for Brenda Armentrout. Welcome to Broomfield, Colorado. About 70 degrees, and it's awesome outside, so welcome. I'm doing my speech on relationship deterioration and repair, and this is my PowerPoint to help you. Deterioration. The relationship begins to fall apart, crumble, or fail. You have weakening bonds. You get bored of the everyday routine, and you get distractions such as work, hobbies, relationships, no matter how harmless, even at the job, you might meet a new person and could strengthen into something else, and could weaken the bond you have with the partner you have. You spend less time with each other, and sometimes you have no time to maintain the relationship. Sometimes in a relationship, you maybe make promises that can turn into a major betrayal, or minor arguments that could turn into the things where you could say spiteful comments, which turn into bigger problems, bigger problems, bigger problems, bigger problems, bigger problems, bigger problems.
Now, it's no secret that seeing the way that Chris Watts conducts himself in a social environment is very awkward. He is the type of person that is easily backed into a corner. During a conversation with someone like this, you must always question what they say because they are always seeking validation from you, meaning they're most likely to tell you what you want to hear. You need to understand that lying is part of his coping mechanism. And because you're the one controlling the conversation with these type of people, they will often embellish or fabricate things in order to reinforce your narrative, because in that conversation, they just want to be pleasing to you. Meaning the whole time, they are only seeking acceptance. Pay very close attention to the next clip and what happens when Chris doesn't tell the interrogators what they want to hear.
And I think that you killed these girls before their mom came home and then killed Chanel. And that's what we're kind of left, that's what we have to believe, because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, to her point, if I walked in and my kid was decapitated, I'd call an ambulance, right? So,
knowing there's no hope.
You must remember that before the initial confession, the interrogators were the ones who placed the idea of Shanann doing something to the kids and then Chris retaliating. Before he even made the confession, he already had it in his mind that he wasn't going home. Remember when they brought his father in the interrogation room, he told him that he wasn't going home because he already revealed the affair that he was having with Nicole. His problem is he has so many things and thoughts running through his head that he can't think of a good enough excuse to explain the situation. But luckily for him, the police gave him one. He then repeats the same thing that the interrogators told him to his father.
I don't know what else to say. She hurt him? Yeah. And well, no, that's not her. You're her.
You heard him. I don't know what else to say.
I don't know what else to say.
He was successfully backed into a corner by the interrogators and he acted accordingly. He spoke what they said verbatim, but it's no secret that he's now recanted that story and changed it to he killed all three of them. Is it possible that he murdered all three of them alone? Yes. He even said the words out of his own mouth. But words say one thing, evidence says another. But before we look at that, we must go back to the root cause of the problem itself, and that's his affair.
Hello.
Hi, Nikki. It's Kevin.
Hi.
How are you? Sorry
Hello.
sorry for the delay. I got stuck in a meeting, obviously couldn't walk out. So I apologize for taking so long to get back to you.
It's okay.
You at least got a couple hours of sleep last night?
Yes.
You sound a little bit better than yesterday.
I feel a little bit better. Not much, but I feel like sitting down and just talking about all of that with everybody is like, it's helping.
Good. Well, I think just keep that up, and again, if you need any, if I can put you in touch with somebody from a victim advocate to whatever I can help you with, just call and ask.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to need you to do that once we're done talking.
Okay, sure. I can get somebody in touch with you today.
Now, when Nicole tells her part of the story, she actually describes it as she wanted Chris to work things out with Shanann. But everything she did prior to that statement actually contradicts it. If you step back and really listen to her interviews, you will begin to realize that it was the exact opposite. And she didn't want Chris to work things out with Shanann, but rather she was ready for Chris to leave her. She was even planning Chris's escape. She was helping him look for an apartment. And she said, and I quote, "I put in work," meaning she put a lot of time and effort into looking for an apartment for Chris. She also openly states in the interview that she looked at every apartment there was in the area and that she had found the perfect apartment for Chris, which was conveniently close to her. This entire time, Chris has been telling her that they're getting ready to get separated. Shanann has already got a realtor to sell the house, and he's basically lying through his teeth. I'm pretty sure that Nicole started to realize that things were not as he was explaining them to be. I'm sure that around this time, Nicole probably gave him an ultimatum: either leave her or she's done. I believe this conversation took place on the 11th at the Lazy Dog. I think that date was to discuss their future, and at some point in that night, she began to apply pressure. You see, normally Chris would pay with gift cards whenever they went out, but this night he chose to use the debit card knowing that Shanann would be alerted. This was his way of pleasing Nicole and showing her that he's ready to move towards the future and everything will be out in the open. At the time of this date, Shanann was out of town on business and Nicole knew that. So don't think for 1 second that the topic of when are you leaving your wife did not fly across the table. The next night, on August the 12th, is when they would have lengthy phone call conversations. Most likely her telling him that when she comes home, he needs to handle this. No woman likes playing second fiddle to anyone. She tried to minimize her role, but we all know better. She was afraid of charges when all she had to do was tell the truth, but she was too afraid of how the media was going to portray her. We do know one thing for certain, that shortly after their last phone call, Shanann would arrive home and things would change forever.
Went through a long struggle with my ex, who's made me a better person today. Like, I always see the good and bad, because I feel like anytime there's something bad that goes on in someone's life or a struggle, it is hard. I know firsthand, it's very hard to see the good in anything bad that's going on, but I promise you, if you dig deep enough into that struggle, you will find positive and good in it.
Nicole?
Yes.
In this just released video, we're seeing the unsung hero whose determination may have stopped Chris Watts from getting away with murdering his pregnant wife and 2 little daughters. Nicole Atkinson knew something was wrong when her best friend Shanann Watts didn't turn up for a doctor's appointment. She immediately called police.
I can't get a hold of her. I called, I texted. Her car's in the garage, her shoes she wears every single day right in the front door.
The police body cam video shows Chris Watts arriving home. Imagine his surprise at finding cops already at his house. He had just disposed of the bodies of his wife and children in an oil storage facility where he worked.
Nobody's heard from him, nobody's seen him.
But thanks to Nicole, he's had no time to get rid of personal items that his wife would have taken with her if she was staying with a friend, as Chris Watts was claiming.
Oh, I love you, girl.
Bella, how many babies do I have in my belly?
5.
Whoa.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
That's a lot of babies. You better grow up really quickly.
The last question to answer would be my opinion on whether or not I feel like Nicole played a substantial role in the murdering of that family. I've done a lot of research and ran across a lot of information, but what I did realize is that a lot of the information floating around isn't true. When it comes to Nicole, some people have very strong feelings about her, and I'm not here to tell you to change how you feel about another person, but rather look at the facts and the evidence. Do I feel like she pressured him to leave his wife? Yes. Do I feel like she played a role in the murders? No. There is absolutely zero evidence linking her to that. At least circumstantial evidence, because all we can view is reports and footage. On the day that the police searched Chris Watts' house, that night Nicole Kessinger had a flurry of calls with Chris. When she is questioned about those calls, she will not disclose the contents of the conversation, but rather keep saying it was normal talk. But I don't believe that. Neither did the interrogators, because you can hear it in their voice while they're interviewing her. They know she knows, and they know that by now Chris has told her at least what has happened.
Months in the last week or so, and like I said, I never know what's true and what's not anymore.
Sure.
So I figured I'll just give you guys everything I have. And hopefully I don't have to keep calling you back with more, but no promises.
No, that's okay. Please do. Like I told you yesterday, anything that comes to mind that you think is important, I'd like to know. Because you know him better than anybody probably over the last 6 to 8 weeks. So that's anything that he said to you or anything that stands out to you as you're reflecting on all this kind of mess here is important for me to know.
Judge the conversation. He knows that she knows what happened, but we all know that when people are wrapped up in situations like this, they are afraid of getting charges. She didn't outright tell exactly what Chris told her, because believe me, I know he told her what happened. In fact, some weird circumstances happened during the investigation. The police will receive a tip from a psychic who wishes to remain anonymous. Someone from Massachusetts allegedly left a tip, but in this tip, it's saying exactly what happened. A dispute between 2 and 5 a.m., strangling Shanann, suffocating the girls, moving the bodies in a truck. After looking at it, I truly believe that this so-called anonymous psychic is actually Nicole. I think that at some point in time, Nicole had a private conversation with the investigators. I'm about to play a clip of the phone interview where he actually makes mention to her that she doesn't have to mention something that they talked about the other night. You may remember part of this clip from when I played it earlier, and I played it for a reason. Now I want to point out that he is actually pursuing her as a victim. And again, he will emphasize on the fact that she doesn't have to bring up whatever they talked about the other night. He was letting her know beforehand that this call is being recorded. It was a subliminal warning to watch your mouth.
It's okay.
You at least got a couple hours of sleep last night?
Yes.
You sound a little bit better than yesterday.
I feel a little bit better, not much, but I feel like sitting down and just talking about all of that with everybody is like, it's helping.
Good. Well, I think just keep that up, and again, if you need if I can put you in touch with somebody from Victim Advocate to whatever I can help you with, just call and ask.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to need you to do that once we're done talking.
Okay, sure. I can get somebody in touch with you today, and you don't need to tell me about anything. We talked about that yesterday, but it might be something good for you to do, and I can make that happen today.
Now think back to when I played the clip where I said the investigators act a certain way if Chris doesn't tell them what they want to hear.
And I think that you killed these girls before their mom came home and then killed Chanel. And that's what we're kind of left, that's what we have to believe, because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, to her point, if I walked in and my kid was decapitated, I'd call an ambulance, right? So,
knowing there's no hope.
It just doesn't make sense.
You need to realize that at this point in time, Chris had already gave his statement on the events that occurred. Also at that point, they had just started working on recovering the bodies. There was no way to discredit his theory that Shanann hurt the kids and he retaliated at that time. Despite not being able to rule out his statement, they still continued on with the interview process and pushed him. But I believe that this happened because the detective already knew what truly happened via Nicole. When I say I didn't approve of their tactics, I didn't like the way that they strong-armed him and then basically gave him an excuse to spit out of his mouth. They backed a socially awkward guy into a corner and then gave him his escape, which is why the interview is total BS and he wasn't telling the truth. Even when they get to court and he pleads guilty, that's the end of it. Yes, he did an interview confessing everything from jail, but how much of that do you truly believe? After looking over the paperwork and studying the footage and analyzing everything, I have came to a theory of events that I believe happened that night. Remember, these events are my opinion. This is the best logical explanation that I could come up with. First, we need to start off with Nicole Ketzinger and her statements about Chris. In Nicole's interview, she makes mention of the fact that Chris told her that he sleeps in a separate bed from Shanann. If that statement is true, then upon Shanann's arrival, that should place Chris in the master bedroom, if he only sleeps there when she's out of town. Shanann's flight was actually delayed. She was supposed to get in around 11 o'clock. She actually made it there around 2 a.m. Prior to Shanann's arrival, she had already been alerted about Chris's date at the Lazy Dog. This is a date where I make mention that I felt like maybe Nicole may have pressured him into speeding up the process of leaving his wife. Arriving at 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm sure that Shanann is tired, she's ready to go to sleep. And if she is the loving and empathetic wife, as others describe her, she's not the type to wake Chris up in the middle of the night to argue, especially knowing he has to be at work in the morning. I believe that Shanann walked in the house, checked on the girls, and then she decided to leave a subliminal message next to Chris. Instead of waking him up and arguing, I believe that she removed her wedding ring and placed it next to him. So when he wakes up, he gets the idea. I know that everyone is familiar with the infamous clip where he goes in the room and he comes back out with the ring on his index finger saying that he found it. Now, I know that some people believe that he was trying to stage a scene, but I don't think that's what he was doing. If he wanted to stage the scene to make it look like Shanann had left him and ran off with the kids, there are a million other things he could have done to reinforce that narrative in the time span before work. I don't think that was his intent. He wanted them to simply vanish, never to be found again. Hence why he put his girls in the oil tanks and buried Shanann. I think he walked in the room, was reminded that the ring was there, and thought it would be better if he brought it out first before the police find it and question him about it. Now back to Shanann. And after she takes the wedding ring off and places it next to Chris on the bed. I believe she then immediately retreated downstairs and then went to sleep in the bed that is in the basement. I came to this theory by viewing the canine footage.
We don't know. It's the only bed in the house that's unmade.
Now what led me to the theory that Shanann could have possibly went to sleep in that very bed is when they kept on combing through, they ran across a purple sleeping mask on top of a pillow. At some point in that night, an argument pursued. I think that Chris woke up, saw the wedding ring, and started to flip his top because after all, now he's the one being ignored. Now he's the one who's not the center of attention, and everyone can't handle it when the shoe is on the other foot. I think that Chris could have possibly called her from upstairs to come talk to him or whatever happened. But at some point, I feel like she got out of the bed in the basement, went to the top of the stairs, turned on the TV, and then cut up the volume. What led me to this theory is when the police came to his house initially, I noticed the placement of the remote upstairs was in an odd place. The remote is actually positioned facing towards the TV, which led me to believe that someone was using it from the stairs. The next question would be, why did she cut on the TV and turn up the volume? Well, because I believe that the girls weren't in the room sleeping, but rather downstairs in the living room sleeping. Most of the time when the parents go out of town, the children like to stay up and greet the mother or father at the door, which makes me think they fell asleep in the living room waiting on Shanann. She then uses the remote to turn on the TV and cut up the volume. Now we know by the neighbor's testimony that Chris is a loud yeller because they said that they could hear him yelling at Shanann from their home. With Shanann already knowing that Chris is prone to get loud, she prepares beforehand by turning on the TV and cutting up the volume, that way the girls don't hear it. The next theory to explore would be, how did Shanann lose her life? In Chris's latest confession, he makes notice to the fact that him and Shanann had sex, which I believe truly occurred. He also makes mention to the fact that he can't remember anything about the killing. He just remembers Shanann laying on the bed face down. I think that Chris murdered Shanann during sex. This is a feasible theory because this explains why she doesn't have any defensive wounds and she doesn't have any DNA under her fingernails. I think that during the sexual intercourse, Shanann was laying on her stomach and Chris was on top of her. I think he mounted her, began to choke her, and then killed her in this manner. This would explain her not having any defensive wound. If he mounts her from the back, she doesn't have the arm span to reach back and defend herself. During the course of this, so much pressure was on her back and her stomach that it created what is called placenta abruption. This would explain why during the autopsy, the fetus was expelled because it often ends up in a premature birth. He then lays there, thinks about what to do with the body, decides to wrap her up in the sheets. While he's transporting her downstairs, I believe the kids were already woke. Now during the autopsy of the girls, they didn't find any trauma outside of minor scrapes. But Bella, however, did have a bite mark on her tongue and a bruise on her left shoulder. Biting your tongue is not consistent with smothering. Chris is a grown man. If he wanted to hold her head in place and cover her mouth and her nose, there is no way she would have been able to move. I think that in the midst of Chris transferring the body, Shanann was probably laying on the ground. At some point, Bella runs up as he's picking up the body off the ground and gets close enough to his neck to grab it, which would explain the wound captured on Chris's neck during the interview. That is definitely a wound from a child and not a wound from a grown woman. In the course of trying to defend her mother because she obviously knows something is wrong, Chris pushes her down. which causes the bruising on her left shoulder, and the aftershock is what caused her to bite down on her tongue. He realized in that moment when Bella was defending her mother, he's not going to be able to sweet talk his kids into not telling what happened. They know at this point something is wrong with mommy, and Chris knows he's not about to get away with it if the girls are still breathing. He then decides to suffocate them there and then in the house. No, I don't believe they were alive in the truck. He then takes them to the job site and discards of the bodies. That is my theory on what I believe happened. I'm not about to sit here and conjure up a story, because the truth is, when you look at the paperwork and look at the facts and the details of everything, nothing goes against the fact Chris did it by himself. But for now, the real story belongs to Chris, because he's the only one who knows the truth about what happened that night. But what's done in the dark eventually comes to the light, and one day he will reveal all.
There's plenty of first standard here.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What in the world is that? Wow.
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
No, I won't feel broken when